I just don't think about it.
I feel like I'm gonna have like people come at 9:50 saying here's the 9:45 tour, you know what I mean? So I'm kind of like, okay. All right. Well, thank you all for coming today. My name is Garrison. I'll be your tour guide. Happy 4th of July. We're gonna head down into the 1845 Bevans Lead Mine, a real working lead mine back in its time. We're gonna head into this little building here, put on our hard hats. I'll show you guys some galena when we get into the entry building, and then we'll head down to the mine. Sound good?
Excellent.
Good.
Hey, where's our helmets?
Just inside here.
Yeah. I just walking around.
Mike, over here. You got to put your hand with
Yeah, I
But everyone
found
else
out
wants
go
to.
errand.
I'll probably take my hair.
Michael, you have to find sign.
They have a little wheel on the back you can use to tighten it on them.
Boys, you can get here with us.
There we go. My sticker's coming off. Oh, boy. These are head and, okay.
Okay, while everyone's getting their hats on, I'll pass this around. What I have in my hand here is some galena. This is the lead ore that the miners would have been looking for back in 1845. This type of lead is about 87% lead and 13% sulfur, so even though it is lead, it still is safe to touch. You're not going to get lead poisoning from this because of the sulfur counteracts that. The miners back in 1845 would have been mining this stuff to make things like lead pipes, lead paint, and lead shots, so you can think of a Civil War era bullet. So we'll see some examples of these when we go down the mine, and let everyone take a quick peek at that.
This is what you had, right?
Yeah, I have a chunk of that.
Yeah, we have some, they can get from little penny sizes to the size of a basketball, or others like that.
Hey, can we go now?
Yeah, right now.
Here, you can give it back.
We'll get out of this humidity. So it'll be about 50 to 54 degrees hopefully down there, so it'll be really nice, so we'll head down.
Many steps.
Yep, 9 steps.
So many steps.
Ooh, and we have to come back up.
Oh, my goodness. This is a young university market.
Nice and slow. Yep, take it slow.
This is like so fun.
It's a little bit wet in spots.
Condensation.
Should get wetter as we go down.
Once we get to the ground floor, it'll dry out actually.
Okay.
Three more landings to go.
How far down are we?
Stairway, I think. Coming, yep.
Looks like it makes its own weather. It's foggy or it's my glasses.
So in the morning, when it gets, if it's a really, really humid morning like today, you'll get mist in the mine.
Cool.
So since you guys, my first tour, you guys probably get to see this, and then once it gets around 3 o'clock, this is probably all going to dissipate.
Yes.
It's probably the most photographed place.
Where's the train?
Hey, we gotta listen.
Alrighty. Alright, well now we are down 50 feet underground in the Bevans Lead Mine. A couple things I want to mention before we start to explore around. The mine here is divided up into 2 sections, so as the name suggests, this is the Bevans Lead Mine. Another thing that we mined in this region of Wisconsin was zinc. But however, since this is a lead mine, there was no zinc down here. So the way our mine is set up, we kind of have 2 mines in one. So everything behind me here, behind this wood divider, this is the lead portion of our tour. We'll see how the miners would have worked back in 1845. We'll head down this tunnel. We'll come back around out this side, and then we will be back out in this open area. This whole open area is a reconstruction of what a zinc mine would have looked like around the turn of the century, around 1900, 1910. This is meant to show the other type of mining that we had in this region, mostly because we don't have any zinc mines that we can go into nowadays. Most of them are closed down, collapsed, and whatnot. So we'll see the lead portion first, then the zinc, and then we'll head back up to the top and we'll check out the Hoist House. One more thing I want to mention, I forgot to mention up top, there are mannequins down in the mine, so for the little ones, if they'll see the mannequins down there, kind of spooky, they're kind of old. They'll kind of sneak up on us around the corners, but I'll point them out as we go. They're there to show us what the miners would look like in 1845 and 1900. All right. Oh, and the ceiling is going to drip water on us all the whole time we're down here, so. Okay, we'll head down the tunnel.
Well, that scared me. That's great.
Yep.
You know when you should duck. Thank you. Come to the left, and then right, to the right. Good. Yes, you have a pile of rock. Okay. Here's your first mannequin to the left with a wheelbarrow.
So I'll start over on this side. On our left here, we can see Miner Joe. This is our typical 1845 miner. He is using some pretty basic tools for the time period: hammer, shovel, pickaxe, chisel, wheelbarrow, and other stuff like that. One thing he's going to have down here, which he's not wearing it right now, but some of the other miners around the corner are, Miner Joe and others are going to have this thing called a stick and Tommy on their cap. So if you feel the brim of your hard hat, you can imagine gluing a candle, kind of like the one on the wall there, to the front of your hard hat and then lighting it, and that's how you're going to see down here, because mine is the electricity and mine is my flashlight. You can imagine it's going to be pitch black down here. So you're going to have candles and you're going to be your stick and Tommy, and when we go around the corner, we'll meet another miner. He will have his stick and Tommy in his cap. So what Miner Joe is looking for, he's looking for galena, or the lead ore that I showed you guys up top. What he and we are all standing in is called the drift. This is the main vein of lead, or the main tunnel that the miners are going to follow underground. So they're going to find their source of lead, come down, and then when it branches off in other directions, they'll follow it. So you can imagine this was all a long vein of lead they followed throughout the mine. And once they clear it out, they'll start digging for smaller pockets off the side. And that's what Miner Joe is doing. He's looking for small pockets of galena that he finds on his own. So as he's digging through here, he's going to be running into a lot of waste rock. So the waste rock is all this galena dolomite or limestone that's going to be lined up here, and we'll see an extreme example of that down the tunnel when you consider the fact that this mine was in operation for about 2.5 to 3 years. The reason why you have so much waste rock building up that looks like this in big chunks is because in 1845 you don't have bulldozers, jackhammers, dump trucks, stuff like that. So all you have is a windlass, which is a rope crank bucket that takes you up to the surface, and you physically cannot take giant rocks like this up the surface to get them out of the mine, so they stay down here. Mm-hmm. So if you're in a mine like this and you're digging this stuff out for 2.5 to 3 years, and all you're doing is pushing it off the side, it's going to build up and build up and build up, and eventually we'll see how bad that gets. But as Miner Joe is working, he's only looking for galena. He's not taking the waste rock out of the mine. When Miner Joe is working over here, he might be coming from a bunch of different nationalities. Mm-hmm. A lot of the settlers that came here in the 1820s and 30s are going to be people coming from the East Coast of the U.S., and kind of Mid-South, Kentucky and Tennessee. Also, you're going to have people immigrating to this part of, this was when this was still a territory. You have people immigrating from Germany, Switzerland, Ireland, Wales, especially Cornwall, England. So if you ever hear someone talk about the Cornish, those are the major groups of miners that are going to come here. They're all going to be coal miners that they hear about the galena or lead ore in this region, and they come all the way across the Atlantic just to mine in this specific region of the country. So as I'm just going to say he's a Cornish miner, this is most likely he is. Joe here, as he's working, he's going to be using that mining experience from his forefathers to create these tunnels and these kind of holes in the wall. Now, one of the types of holes in the wall that these miners can build is something called a bear hole, which we can see right behind everyone.
Right here.
Oh, okay. A bear hole.
Right here.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I know this bear hole.
So the bear hole, it's kind of like a giant letter C shape. So there's two reasons why you, and it's called a bear hole. I'm not sure why. There's no bears down here. But these bear holes were created for two purposes. The first purpose was to say the miners found galena that was running parallel to the main drift that we're standing in. You can't physically just keep making the mine wider and wider and wider because you might risk caving in the ceiling after a certain amount of feet because it will bow in the ceiling. So if you have the proper supports, like we'll see behind me in a little bit, or further down the tunnel I should say, that'd be fine, but more often than not you don't have the resources to do that. So you create these bear holes to grab the galena and come out the other side so you don't risk caving in the ceiling. So you'll come in, do a loop, and then you'll have something called a pillar, which is the second reason to build a bear hole, that is going to hold up the ceiling. So the pillar is that large chunk of rock between the two entrances to the bear hole. Now these are going to be, as the name suggests, these are going to be pillars or supports to hold up the ceiling. And since all you have to do is dig around them, it's pretty cost effective just to dig that tunnel. And now you can imagine dozens of these pillars running down the tunnel as we go. So you have getting the galena out and creating pillars. Those are the two purposes for a bear hole. Now a lot of these families that come from Cornwall, Wales, Germany, Ireland, Switzerland, and other places, they're going to have large farming families. A lot of these miners are going to farm and mine kind of back and forth. As these miners are working down here, they're going to have some of the miners might have their children down here with them. Now this is not like forced child labor. This is you're 13 years old, help your dad out in the mine for a day or something like that.
Okay.
So you can tell that these bear holes are very low to the ground, are very short, so any of us, or except for the little guys, we can't just walk in there, we'd
Right.
bump our heads.
Right.
So although it's not confirmed for the Bevans Lead mine, it can be probably rightly assumed that in other mines like this, the reason why bear holes are so short is because you could have your children go in there and get the galena for you, and you won't have to waste time digging the tunnel higher.
Right.
So we can have children go in there and grab the galena. Now, I know we have the little guys here, but if anyone else wants to, we do allow people to go into the bear hole and check it out up to that first light halfway through. So if anyone wants to go in there, that is totally fine. I'm going to turn on the light, and if you guys want to go in there, you can.
I have a question with the movie Coal Miner's Daughter. You heard about Black Lung?
Yeah.
Is that an issue here?
No, because since you were not, so coal mine, I'm assuming it's much deeper underground. You're not going to have, since you're only 50 feet below ground, or close to the surface, that you have good air circulation, you're not going to have problems like that.
Okay.
So you're not breathing in the same stuff that you would if you were 200 feet lower underground.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm assuming that I don't know if Wisconsin ever had any coal mines per se.
Not in this area, not in the Driftwood region of Wisconsin, no. Not that I know of. Just zinc and lead.
Okay, and generally speaking, the coal mines, if we had any, were considerably deeper.
Yes. I can't speak with how much deeper, but they would be deeper than a lead mine. Lead mine is probably one of the more surface, less deep mines out there. And plus, in 1845, you didn't have the technology to go that deep, really yet. So when we get to the zinc mine time, that's going to change.
So I mean, they did use dynamite.
Not in 1845. When we get to the zinc mine, when we get to the 1890s and 1900s, we'll have dynamite, so we'll see right in that corner over there, we'll see what they would use instead. So, I'll direct you guys over here. If you guys want to stand over on that platform and look down the tunnel, I'll talk while you guys are looking. You guys can see, I'll explain what you guys are seeing down there. So what you guys are
Because
looking
of
at
mine.
down that tunnel is what the Bevans Lead mine after 1848 looked like. So
One more
I know, but your wife's right there.
in 1971, 72, the first survey team, the museum, discovered this place, and they came down here and started to excavate. And what you guys are seeing down this tunnel is what the entirety of the Bevans Lead mine looks like at one point. So I mentioned this mine was open for 2.5 or 3 years. Since you can't take that waste rock to the ceiling, to the surface, this is what ends up happening. The mine gets so packed in with waste rock that you physically cannot move down here. And you guys can notice the miners in the back there. Typically in a lead mine that's been this worked up or this worked through, you're going to be, toward the end of the mine's lifespan, you're going to be literally crawling on your hands and knees, getting through the mine like this. You can imagine pushing that wheelbarrow that Miner Joe has over mounds of rubble and waste rock. This is what the reality is after a couple years of working down here. So when the museum came down here and they sent the survey teams in, and they clean this out. So what we're walking through in the drift, this is nothing like the miners would have been walking through. Well, we have it easy. These guys would have been walking through that end to end. And the only reason that part is still like it is because the museum wanted to leave this here to show us what it would have looked like back in
Not so much walking through here, but crawling.
Crawling, yes. All right, we'll head out. Down through here.
Okay. Going down again. Here we go.
We're gonna, as we walk through here, you can notice there's a bit of the galena still stuck in the wall. So it's not as shiny as the piece I showed you guys, but it is the same rock right there. On my right here, we'll have miner George. He's a little bit creepy, but he's not gonna move. He has the stick and Tommy in his cap to see down here, so we'll see how he is creating these things called timbers, which are the wood supports to hold up the mine. I'll talk a bit more about those when we go down further in the tunnel.
Okay.
Wash your hands.
Yeah, I'll keep my lid on.
There's a big puddle.
Here we go.
Yep, so we have a little bit of a bigger group, so you might have to funnel backwards a little bit so we can get everyone in here. Okay. So we have 3 more miners in this corner I want to show you guys, introduce you to. This is miners Paul, John, and Ringo. These guys... I didn't come up with that, sorry. These guys are preparing the walls for blasting. So what you guys see with George and Joe, these guys would be behind, or before them, working in the tunnel. So what these guys are doing, these two in the front, Paul and John, they are doing something called double jacking. This is how you prepare the walls for blasting. So in Paul's hand there, he has something called a drill steel, which is essentially the sharpened stake that you plant in the wall. If you look on your guys' left, you can see some drill steel holes right on the sedimentary rock. That's something different, but there's one right behind you. There's right there. That is a drill steel hole.
Oh, right here.
Yep. And some of them are put in by the museum tour guide, and some of them are put in by the miners.
Right.
Yep. So these holes are going to be pressed in with these drill steel. So what's going to happen is Paul is going to place this in the wall, and then he is going to do what we call a quarter turn. So basically, just a little nudge. And every time he twists it, John there is going to hit the flat end of the drill steel. So he's going to twist it, hit it, twist it, hit it, twist it, hit it. Eventually, you get a nice even hole like the ones we have on the left there. So as these guys are working, they're going to put these drill steel holes all along the head of the tunnel. And eventually you're going to have Ringo back there. He's going to have a different tool in his hand. He's going to have something called a powder spoon. You can see him placing that in the wall there. So this is how you're going to place the blasting materials in the wall. This is before we have dynamite. We want to have dynamite for a couple more decades. So Ringo, he's going to be placing black powder or gunpowder into these holes. He's going to mix them with wheat straw, kind of because it's dry. It'll catch a spark easier. And they're going to mix those two, and they're going to cover up the hole with beeswax to keep the contents in the wall. Eventually, once Ringo has placed the powdered wheat straw and beeswax in each one of these holes that these two have left, they're going to run some fuses into the holes, and they're going to light them, and they'll tuck themselves around the corner. They'll yell "fire in the hole," and that's one of the ways we get that term or that phrase. And when they do that, they'll blow it. And since this is not like dynamite where you have a massive explosion, you're not going to have giant chunks of rock falling out of the wall. It's going to be kind of like a mini implosion in the wall. But since this is very soft sedimentary rock, it's not going to blow it up, it's going to crack it. And the reason why that's more efficient is because it makes it easier for Paul or Joe and George and others to come by with their chisels and pickaxes and just pick out the pieces of the wall. Because if you blow up that wall, you're blowing up the galena as well. Right. You don't want to pick up little grains of it. You want big chunks. So it's easier just to crack it and then break it off as you go. So as they head through here, they're going to be using the double jacking method and then placing the powder in there to get the galena out of the wall. Now my favorite fact with these guys is how they communicate down here. So as you guys can tell, as I talk, my voice echoes. You can imagine if there were, so in the Bevans Lead Mine, you have about 15 to 20 miners working in a corner like this at any given time. So you can imagine that if there were 15 to 20 more of me all talking at the same time, it'd be very loud. So it's very hard to hear down here. Also, you have the explosions, you have the metal instruments on the rock, and that's all going to contribute to how loud it is down here. Now, also, you guys notice, since you guys are the first tour to come down here in the morning, the humidity hits down here and it creates mist. Now, you can imagine on even worse days, it can be even more misty. So you have mist and you have loud noises. So it's hard to hear, hard to see. So even though Paul and John are standing 3-4 feet apart from each other, they're gonna have a hard time communicating to each other. So Paul dictates when they're done with the drill steel hole. He says, okay, the hole's deep enough, let's go on to another spot. So he has to find a way to tell John that, but even so, since John is distracted by the loud noises, he can't really always tell what Paul is saying. So Paul can't just put his hand in front of his face. He can't jump out of the way because he might get whacked by that big hammer or trip over a rock or some other people that are working next to him or whatnot. So he has to find a way to get John's attention to get him to stop swinging that hammer. So John is focused on the flat end of that drill steel, and Paul knows this. So what Paul's going to do is a little bit crazy, but since he knows that John is focused only on the flat end of that drill steel, if you notice, my thumb is obviously a very different color than the drill steel. In order to get John's attention, what Paul's going to do, he's going to place his thumb on the flat end of that drill steel to get John's attention, because he knows John is looking there, and he knows that's the only thing that John is focused on is that flat bit right there. So the hope, emphasis on hope, is that John's going to see that thumb in the way before he swings next, and he's going to know, okay, now it's time to stop. Let's head on to the next spot in the wall. So we don't know how many miners lost their thumbs doing this, but this is kind of how you would operate in a mine like this.
Was there hearing loss as well?
I believe so, yeah. We don't really have any records of
Right.
from 1845, but that would be an easy inference to guess that would happen.
Okay.
Head down the tunnel.
You two first.
Okay, thank you.
You two first. Then Laurie.
If you guys hold on to your hard hats and look up, you'll notice the original shaft that the miners would have been using to bring ore to the surface, and this is how they're going to get fresh air. So you guys can look at that as we walk by.
Look up. Oh, that's all big shaft. That's how the air gets in here.
Yep.
Hold on to your hard hat. Hopefully. Narrow passageway.
Okay, you want to go first?
Nope, you come on. I think we got enough room. Yep, here we go. Okay, and here's Joe. Oh, we're another Joe.
Yeah, that layer gets you pretty good when you get back up top. Alright, so this is the last lead miner I'm going to introduce you to. This is miner Fred. He is creating something called a gob wall. So the only use you have for waste rock down here is to create gob walls. You take the waste rock and basically all you do is you pack it into the ceiling behind him there. And as you pack them up the ceiling, assuming you get the right shapes of rocks to hold each other up, they're going to hold up the ceiling like that in the corner. Also the timbers that I mentioned with George earlier, these are going to be cut down from local trees in the area, so every time a mine opens, a lot of trees in the area get cut down. Eventually Platteville's going to get the nickname the City of Stone, or the City of Stones, because you have so much rock and ore coming up, and you have less and less trees. So the City of Stones kind of makes sense. Platteville no longer has that nickname because all the mines are closed down, the trees grow back naturally or get replanted, so we don't have that name anymore, but City of Stones back then makes sense. So these are going to be two of the ways alongside the pillars how you're going to hold up a lead mine. Currently, if you guys look up, you can notice these things called roof bolts. These are how the mine is held up today. These were created by a Platteville mining school student back in the 1960s. Basically what these roof bolts are, they're large coiled springs that you shoot up about 5 or 6 feet into the rock layer. And what they do is they shoot up, they eventually tighten up, and what they do is they pull the ceiling up and they take the layer of rock above the ceiling and pull it down. So basically you're attaching the ceiling to the layer of rock above the ceiling that we're looking at, and that keeps the ceiling kind of attached, and it makes it easier, or makes it impossible for the ceiling to eventually come down on.
Flake off and come down and hit us on the helmet.
Yeah, so when we go out in the open area here, you'll notice that there are literally end-to-end hundreds, if not 1,000 more of these from on every part of the ceiling in the mine.
And they were put in to reopen the mine for...
Yeah, so these were a lot of regular mines use these, but for the sake of keeping this open for as a museum, this is these were put in to keep the mine safe for tourists.
But actual mines in operation? Or do they
Yes, they still use roof bolts, yes.
Okay.
So we head back out in the open area.
We've got a sort of doorway we're turning around.
Yeah.
Through here. And now we're back at the bench. Oh, wow. So,
Just made a loop.
Now we can breathe out here. It's a little bit not as crowded.
yeah.
Get a
Okay.
picture of this.
So I'm going to transition to zinc mining. So when we get to around the late 1840s, you're going to have the gold rush that's going to occur out in California, Nevada, and other places. You're going to have a lot of people, especially lead miners, head out west to go mine gold, and those that do go up back, not all of them come back, only about 60%. So those that lead miners that go out to mine gold, they come back, they settle down as farmers, and they don't continue mining for lead. So eventually you're going to have kind of a lull in this area for mining from about 1850 to about 1880, and then around the 1880s you're going to have a pickup of zinc mining. So you're going to have new technologies that I'm not entirely sure how they work, but some new technologies coming out that will process rock differently. So you'll have sphalerite, which will be the next thing that kind of is a mineral that runs alongside lead, and we can see some of that right here. So you guys want to pass that around? So this is going to be what the miners discover they can also mine too, and then sphalerite has zinc in it. So once the miners learn they can mine zinc, they're going to transition to that. So zinc can be used for a bunch of different things like galvanizing metal, creating bullets, you can use it to make sunscreen, you can use it for density and a couple other things like that. So it's going to be the next kind of kid on the block, and it's going to take over the lead mining, and it's only going to be zinc from then on out. So the zinc miners around the turn of the century, they're going to have some new tools at their disposal. One of the things that the zinc miners are going to have, they're going to have large metal ore buckets like this one. Now, when miners use these, they can use these to transport waste rock and ore, and they can also use them to transport themselves. So in buckets like this, you can fit about 4 or 5 miners, and the only reason you fit so many guys in one bucket is you're going to have one leg in the bucket and one leg out. We're going to have some videos playing up in the main part of the museum. I don't know if our director is debuting them. They were just made, but in that video it shows how the miners. It shows videos of how the miners would have been riding these. So you have one leg in, one leg out, and that makes it easier to have more people in the bucket. Also, you can have, or the other reason you have your leg out of the bucket is when you go up the shaft here, these ore buckets like to wobble as they go up. So you'll have your left or right leg out. Thanks, bud. You're going to have your leg out, and you're going to use that to hold off the wall. So as you go up, you're going to be wobbling, and you imagine this is the rock wall here. If it starts to swing to my side, I'll kick my leg out and bounce off the wall. So I don't know about you guys, but the metal on rock, really hard. If you're going up in an enclosed tunnel like that, that's going to be really deafening. So you're going to want to be able to push off the wall. Now obviously it's not very safe, and you might lose a leg here and there. So you don't want to always be doing that. Eventually you're going to have some government organizations, kind of like how we have OSHA today, that creates like safety things for workplace environments. These officials are going to create something called a torpedo, which we have right here. This is going to be issued to the miners, and they're going to be required to use these, but even though this is a government required thing, the miners are really going to hate these for a couple reasons. So the torpedo, even though they want this to be taking place of the bucket, this does not transport ore or waste rock, it just transports people. Now when you transport people in this, it only carries about 3. I don't think you can carry more than that. So it's going to be inefficient for those reasons, no ore and less people. Also, it's in an enclosed tube, so when you go up in this, if you're riding up the top and this thing starts to wobble, there's nothing to stop you from banging on the walls all the way to the top. So you're going to be, if you're in this, it's going to be even more deafening because it's so tight. So the miners are really going to hate using this, and as they're going up, they're going to have to also switch these out as they go up. So if you have ore, you take this, that goes up, comes back down. Now you have 20 guys who want to go up and eat their lunch. You have to go grab 3 of these, and it's just not very efficient. Now, when the miners got these, they would kind of do with them what you see them doing now. They just sit there on the side and they collect dust, and no one uses them. The only time the miners are going to actually use these is if an inspector comes. Now, an inspector is kind of a government official that has the authority to close, condemn, take away your mine rights, sell them off to someone else. Something like that. So you're not going to use these until that inspector comes. As soon as that guy leaves, you throw him off to the side and go back to going in, one leg out in one of these. I forgot to mention that if you look in the bucket here with my flashlight off, you'll notice the dents from the rocks. So if you can imagine just how hard these things hit. So that's why you want your leg out as you're going up. So you'll notice the dents all along on the inside here. The next thing I want to show you guys is something called the pegboard, right about here. This is how the miners are going to keep track of all the work they do down in a mine. So if you are the foreman or the bigwig running the mining operation, you're not going to always be down here with the men that are mining. So how do you pay them if you don't, you see the ore buckets coming up, but you don't see who put that stuff in the bucket. So how do you pay them if you don't see it? So the miners are going to pay these things called the pegboard. So now if you imagine, say we have 7 miners in this zinc mine working down here. So each zinc miner can do about 20 buckets of these on average a day. And each one of those buckets is going to pay about 10 to 12 cents. So at the end of the day, working 8 or 9 hours, 6 days a week, you're going to get paid about $1.50 to $2 a day for mining, or for taking the stuff off of the surface. So for every bucket you do, so say your miner, Joe, that we met first, he is going to say he is miner 6, he's going to keep track of all his work. So for every bucket that he fills with waste rock, zinc, or both, he's going to get 1 peg in the pegboard. And that's going to go all the way up to 11. And once he gets to his 12th bucket, he's going to get 1 in the red, and that counts for 12, and then that goes up in increments of 12, 12, 24, 36, 48, so on. At the end of the day, they're going to review this, and this is how they're going to get paid out. Because you don't get paid a salary, you get paid by how much you do. So if you do 1 bucket a day, that's 10 cents. If you do 20, that's $2. And these miners will know when we go back up the surface how little time they spend up in the hoist house, but they want to get back down here and keep working because they want to get all that, as much ore out of here as they can, because the more they do, the more they get paid. Okay, so I'll show you guys up the shaft here. I know we have a little bit bigger group, so if we want to take turns, come over here. I'll shine my flashlight up here, and we'll see all the way up into the hoist house.
How much did the average miner get paid?
If they're doing the average, it's about $1.50 to $2 a day.
Was that considered good pay?
Yes, back then that would have been, over time, that would have been enough to buy a house over time, feed your family, clothe your kids. Like, even though this is laborious and dangerous work, the reason why these miners are coming out in droves to mine this stuff is because of how well it pays. And even though by our standard today it's not a lot of money, back then for some poor farmers out in south Wisconsin.
When did you get paid 10 cents a day for being a farmer?
Right.
Something like that, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
So if anyone else wants to look at the shaft here, I'll have a flashlight up here so you can see. Head down this way.
This was one from the shaft.
This is what actually a replica made by the museum. So you'll see shafts like this.
The other one was,
That was the original. That one's so old.
Lori,
that's like a block
you're
up
ahead of me.
great because it's yeah.
Pardon? Watch yourself. Yep. Heading uphill a little.
Even though it was created by the museum, it's still, that's what it would look like, only a little bit deeper in the ground.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to be drinking the water that's dripping here. No. No. Garrison.
Yeah.
How do they drink their water down here? Did they bring their own water?
I'd say they had canteens or something like that. A lot of the miners, they're gonna be down here. They're gonna be down here for hours and hours on end. So they're
You
gonna
sure wouldn't want to be drinking this condensate.
No, you would not. Especially since it's running through rock that has lead in it, so you don't want to be drinking that.
Yeah. They knew lead wasn't good for them back then,
Yep,
right?
and that's one of the reasons why you're going to transition to zinc, and people are going to mine that instead.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're at the head of the zinc mining operation. So up here we have 3 more miners. I don't have names for these guys, but the miner on the left there, he is using something called a pneumatic drill or a compressed air drill, and that is going to be used to drill holes in the wall. So similar to how we had Paul and John double jacking the wall and risking their thumbs. This guy is going to be using a pneumatic drill to punch a hole about 10 or 12 feet into the wall, and by this time we have dynamite. So we can start placing multiple sticks of dynamite in here. Now these drills are going to be extremely loud, and a lot of the miners that work these are going to be doing these for 3-4 hours at a time, and many of them are going to be
Losing their hearing.
Losing their hearing. In the video we have playing up top, one of the miners explains that he would work this for 3-4 hours, and he'd have ringing in his ears for the next 24 hours, or at least until the next time he went down in the mine. So these miners are going to be placing these holes, and they're going to be drilling them all along the head of the tunnel. Now, eventually, you're going to have some guys working on fuses. They're going to be tying fuses to dynamite sticks. So that table we saw back there in the middle area, they're going to be tying up fuses, sending them along the way, placing them into the holes, and getting them ready to blast. So as this guy, or as this miner starts drilling all the holes in here, he is going to allow the other guys to put the sticks in there, and then once all the sticks are in, they're going to run some fuses to the surface, and they're gonna get out of the mine. Unlike the lead miners who can just tuck themselves around the corner and plug their ears, these guys have to physically get out of here because this is gonna be a massive explosion. They're gonna have rocks coming down everywhere. So once they detonate the mine, they're gonna wait about an hour or two for the rock and dust to settle, and after the rock and dust settle, you're gonna have to send a small group of guys down to check on the situation in the mine. These guys are gonna look like the gentleman in the back there. He is called the trimmer. So the trimmers are gonna come down, and their job is the most dangerous job in a zinc mine. What they have to do is come down here with those large metal rods and trim or knock down the rocks that are still stuck to the wall after the explosion. Because not all the rocks will come down. They'll be loose, but they're not gonna come down. So the trimmer's gonna do, he's gonna take that large metal rod, he's gonna poke and prod the wall, he's gonna stick that rock into small cracks to knock out some of the rocks. He's going to bang the rocks with he's going to bang the rocks on the underside with his stick sometimes to check for vibration. So the more vibrations he feels, that's how he knows how loose the rock is and to avoid it. And the reason why his job is so dangerous is because he does not know which rocks are going to fall, which ones are not, or which ones are small, which ones are big. So he could be poking at a rock that he thinks is the size of his fist, but it could be 3 times the size. So he risks, poking a rock that's too big and falls down and squishes him. So because of that danger, that uncertainty, he's going to get paid about 10 to 15 cents more than every other miner in the zinc mining operation. Once the trimmer or trimmers have done their job and all the rocks are knocked down, they're going to call their buddies back down to the mine, and they're going to get back to work. The majority of the guys that you're going to have come back down here are going to be called muckers. And that's what that guy is right in the front here. He is a mucker. Now the muckers get their nickname from the fact that they are mucking around in the mud, the dirt, waste rock, zinc, etc., and also water. So as the muckers work down here, their job is to shovel up the waste rock and the zinc. So the lead miners, I mentioned, only take the lead up, they leave the waste rock down here. These guys take it both up because these rocks are going to get processed on the surface and they're going to be separated out there. So you can clean out the mine instead of just leaving it all to pile up. So as the muckers are working, they're going to shovel up all the waste rock and zinc, and they're going to send it along the way. Now, one of the things that I mentioned that these guys get dirty from is the water. In a mine like this, so we're in a lead mine, so we're only about 50 feet down, which is about the average for a mine like this. We only get drips from the ceiling and some puddles, and that's about it. These guys, since they're in a zinc mine, if this was a real zinc mine, you would be 200 to 300 feet below ground. So you'd be 3 times lower than we are now. So when you get to around the 200 feet mark, 250 feet mark, you're going to be well below the water table. So if you are below the water table and you accidentally chip into a reservoir that's underground, you're going to have water literally gushing out of the walls at you, and you're going to have water coming up to your knees or higher. So the muckers are going to be waiting around in that, trying to get that all that waste rock out of here. So if you notice, we have a kind of a humming sound coming from over there. That is the museum pumping some extra fresh air down here, so it's better to breathe. When the miners are working down here, they're going to be doing the same thing. They're going to be pumping air down here. Also, they're going to be pumping water out, because just how much water you get down here. Right. Now, famously, some mines in this area were dry, no problem with water, but for the majority of the time, these zinc mines are going to be you're going to be swimming basically at some point, just trying to get through some of the water in here. So you're going to have to pump water out. So that, and because of that, all that dirty, mucky water, muckers makes that nickname sticks. So as the muckers shovel up the waste rock and zinc, they're going to place them in these carts and they're going to send them along the way. Now in the early 19-teens, when you have the first kind of zinc miners working through here, they're going to be using mules and horses to pull multiple buckets to the end of the shaft there. But once you get to the 1920s and 30s, you're going to have zinc trains. And the train you guys are going to ride today is a 1931 zinc train. So that would have been the type of train that would have been in a mine, in a zinc mine like this. So as the train...
It's using coal for that locomotive to come down here.
I believe maybe
steam?
Steam or diesel. I'm not too sure on that one. I'd have to ask the guys up top. They know it better than I do. But they would they'd be using something like that to power these. These are going to take dozens of ore buckets to the shaft there, and you're going to have a man running the hooks at the end of the shaft. It's called the hooker, and he's going to hook the metal buckets, and they're going to go all the way to the top, and we'll see where they go when we go back up the surface. So you're going to have horses and mules.
So that's what that hook is for on the top of it. was
Yep.
to hook the other handle on the bottom of the upper one.
Yep.
The one- Okay.
Or, yeah, so you're gonna hook the bucket, send it up, it's gonna come back down, you're gonna roll it off the side and give it back to the train guy, he's gonna take it the other way. Then the next bucket come in, you're gonna hook it, shoot it up, comes back down, and it's gonna be empty when it comes back down, and then you're gonna take it, roll it off the side, and get the next bucket, the next bucket, the next bucket.
One at a time, or are they going to chain these buckets together and
They're
pull
not,
all of them up?
they're not gonna chain the buckets together. Because
Just one at a
the
time.
hoist, there's only one machine that's pulling this up. There is a hook on the bottom of each of these buckets, but we'll see that's used for something different. If you hook 3 buckets together, you would snap the rope, you'd snap the cable.
Okay.
So you're gonna only have one up, one down, one up, one down, you're gonna keep going through there. So as these guys are working, these muckers are gonna load this up, send them down to the hooker. Hooker takes them up to the surface into the hoist house, and that's where the rocks are gonna get processed. So we're gonna head back up to the surface, and I'll show you guys where the buckets are gonna go.
I'm assuming that this is a 24-hour operation since light isn't really necessary. They're bringing their light with them.
I'm not sure about 24 hours, but I know they'd work 8 or 9 hours a day in shifts. So we'll cross over here. We're going to run into, I can't get the next tour group, so we're going to run into them. When we get back up to the surface, we're going to drop off our hard hats on the shelf where we got them from.
Okay.
The shelf on the left is all empty, and that's where we're going to drop off the ones you guys are wearing.
First step, we've got a track, so be careful. Coming through. Oh, I just kind of just cross the track.
I know, it's like one rail and that like that.
It's cheap.
Sorry, Alex, I think this.
So we'll let these guys come down first, then we'll head up. Because they're going to be going this way, so.
Okay.
So we have to go back out and into the humidity and all that.
This was a nice break from that.
Yeah. I think it's still, what is it right now? Just 60. Cool. Right on time. That was good timing. Yeah, sorry, I didn't, I thought I heard a door slam like 7 minutes ago. I was like, oh, I'm behind schedule.
No, I didn't know where you were, so
Yeah, we were just good. Yeah.
I'll grab the light from you.
Oh, right there.
I assume it took the museum a long time to get this all in.
Between 1971 and 1979, so almost 10 years. And that's along with getting the collection, all that set up too.
Mostly volunteer, I assume.
Eventually they passed a referendum with the city to get funding and stuff for this, so that's why we have it today. Yeah.
Excellent. A piece of history preserved forever. Happy to hear it.
It's raining down here. I heard.
It's raining?
It's nice and cool.
Yeah, to that humidity.
Yeah, it's kind of chilly down here.
I don't care.
I'm not going to be taking any pictures.
No, I meant,
Let everybody go first.
Here comes Eliza. Bigger than ours, yeah.
I'm glad our group was so small and cozy.
Yeah, I
It
thought
was
I
easier to
had
move
it.
around. The early bird got the
Glad we got our.
Yeah, get in and get before the rush comes. Yeah, those narrow tunnels aren't so fun when you have.
You're going to be coming down here pretty often.
Yeah, no, I got 2 more tours today. I had one at 12:45 and one at 2:15.
Yeah, that's a big group.
Definitely wet. Did you have a contractor come down here to shore everything up?
I mean, I'm not sure. They did it way before my time.
Alright, so ladies and gentlemen, 10:30 tour, step down this way.
We'll start heading up.
Everybody else, here's our glass.
45 lead mine. I love sharing with anybody. You notice this little lead up here, right?
Yeah, you'll hit it about halfway up.
My glasses are steaming.
I think I'll stay down there for a while.
So we're gonna head into the Hoist House first, and then we'll go on to the train. All right, you guys want to follow me?
The Hoist House.
Now we're in the Hoist House. So if you guys look down here, you might actually be able to hear Trevor down there talking. If you look down there, you can see the ore buckets. That shaft you look up, this is the same one. So in this Hoist House, there are two levels. The first level that we're standing right now, this is what I call the miner's lounge or the break room. This is where the miners are going to come up in their buckets, 4 or 5 at a time, one leg in, one leg out. And they're going to come up here, and this is where they're going to relax. In this area, this is where the miners are going to warm up, eat their lunches, and dry off their clothes. For a Hoist House, you're going to have a furnace going at all times. You can imagine that even though it was it's in the low 60s there in the mine today, usually it's about 50 degrees, so it's pretty chilly. If you're walking around in that cold water all day, you're going to want to warm up. So you're going to come up here, you're going to have a furnace blast at all times. It's going to be powered by a large stockpile of firewood. And the miners are going to sit in close proximity to this furnace to warm up. Also, you're going to have your miners wearing protective equipment by this time, and this is where they're going to hang up to dry. So you're going to have rubber waders to wet the water. You're not going to be going down in just your basement farm clothes like the lead miners are doing. Also, the zinc miners are going to have hard hats with carbide lights, so they can see down the mine. And if you guys watched the video indoors in the Hammer Robbins building, you can watch the miners getting these lights set up. Also in that picture, you'll note that the miners are eating their lunches. Now, like I said, if you're a miner, the reason why they're, in the picture, their hands are all dirty, and one of the reasons why their hands are all dirty, they're eating their clean sandwiches, is because they get up here, warm up, dry off, eat quick, go back down, because they want to get as much ore out of the mine as they possibly can. So they spend as little time up here as possible, but they want to get back down and get back to work. Thank you. Now, over in this corner, right about here. So, on the back wall there, we have something called the Hoist Signals, and this is how the miners are going to communicate when they're working down in the mine. You have the hoist man who sits on the second floor here, and he's the one that operates the electric hoist that brings the ore buckets up to the surface. So say you are some miners and you want to come up and eat your lunch. Each one of these number sequences on here represents a different thing. So you have this string here, which would be attached to a handle at the very bottom of the mine. This is how the miners are going to communicate to the hoist man to say, hey, bring us up. If you're down there, this guy up here, the hoist man, he can't see you, he can't hear you. So he needs this string to let him know. So if you have miners that want to come up for their lunch for the day, they have to ring the bell 3 times. And when he hears that bell, he's going to start operating the hoist and bringing it up to the surface. And then when you want to go down, it's 2 and 1. And if you have ore, that's going to be 4 rings, and that's going to go up the second floor. Also, when you have an emergency in the mine, you have 7 rings of the bell. I like to joke with this part that if you have a really bad emergency in the mine, you're going to ring that sucker more than 7 times. You don't want to get out of the mine. So this is how the miners are going to communicate with the hoist man, and the hoist man is going to have to be operating this hoist, which we'll see in a second, 24/7, because you're going to have ore buckets coming up every 30 seconds to a minute, thereabouts. So you're going to have a lot of traffic, and you're going to, especially when you have trains coming through with dozens of buckets, you're going to have to be constantly listening to this thing, knowing what's coming up and what's going back down. Okay, we'll head up these last little bits of stairs, and then we'll see where the rocks get broken up. Stairway. Alright, so in front of us here we have the electric hoist. This is what the hoist man is going to be using to bring the men up to the ceiling. Or to the ceiling, to the hoist, the surface. Now when the hoist man gets the 4 rings of the bell, he's going to know that means that ore is coming up. What he's going to do, he's going to lift this trap door here. He's going to allow the ore bucket to come to the ceiling. I know you mentioned, one of you guys mentioned about the hooks, hooking the buckets together. So when that happens, or it wouldn't happen, but the reason why you have a hook on the bottom of the bucket is so when that bucket comes up the ceiling by itself, you will hook that large metal chain to the bottom of it, and you'll loosen this cord, and that will dump the bucket forward, and it'll dump the contents, the waste rock and the zinc, or both, down to this little half level here, and this is where the rock's broken up. So we'll go down here quick. Yeah, so when the rocks come down here, they're going to land on these things called the Grizzly Bars. Now you're going to have a group of 4 or 5, there are 3 or 4 men called the Grizzly Men, and their job is to break up these rocks. Now with the lead miners, you only have the galena coming up. There's no point in breaking it because it's already in the form you want it. But since these miners are also bringing up the waste rock, they have to break off the pieces of the sphalerite or the zinc that are on the rocks. All these little black specks, this is all of the zinc that they want. So when they're working here, they will be breaking these up with hammers, mallets, and chisels. And when the rocks fall through, the zinc's going to fall through, and so are these little things called tailings, which are the small pieces of waste rock that's in here. The zinc's going to get processed. It's going to get taken off to a roaster or the smelter, whatever you want to call it. And then the tailings are going to be taken off and dumped off into piles off-site. Once the rock has all been broken up and there's no more zinc still on the rock, the large pieces of waste rock are going to be taken into a mine cart and then be pushed out a long bridge, which is right out there, and then be pushed on that long bridge called a trestle. At the end of that trestle, you're going to have some men pushing that to the end of the trestle. It's going to hit that little metal bar, it's going to tip it, it's going to knock off all the waste rock. So if you're driving around the Shoalsburg area, Mineral Quarry, or maybe even some places outside of Platteville, you might know if there's large piles of waste rock sitting out in cornfields or something like that. These are all waste rock piles that are left behind from different zinc mining operations. Even though these buildings would have been long gone, those piles of rock in the state as they're large piles of rock. So once the waste rock has been disposed, the tailings are gone, you're going to have the zinc left around. So when you get to around World War I and World War II and the Korean War, zinc production is going to shoot up. People are going to be mining this like crazy to make things like bullets and the casings for bullets. Also, you're going to have a lot of this used for domestic things. If anyone takes vitamins daily, those have zinc in them, so there's another thing to use it for. So there's going to be a lot more safe uses for zinc versus lead. So when we get to around 1960s and 70s, you're going to have the last hurrah of the zinc miners. Now, when we get to the 70s, you're going to have the Wisconsin DNR and the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, working to kind of curtail this mining. A lot of the miners are going to be using these roasters to get the ore, the large zinc bars, those pigs. So you think of like a gold bar, like Fort Knox kind of thing. That shape, those are what the zinc's going to be made into. These roasters are going to be making those. They're going to be pushing off a lot of fumes off into the environment, off into the atmosphere, and that's going to get the attention of the EPA, and they're going to close down some mines. Also, the Wisconsin DNR is going to close a lot of these mines down, and the last one of these is going to close around 1979 in Shelbyville. So, also, you're going to have a kind of a drop in the prices of zinc because a lot of the miners that I've met and talked to, they say that it's easier to import zinc than it is to actually mine it. So a lot of these mining operations are run by 15, 20 guys that are also farmers, stuff like that. So this can be a very expensive venture. And when we get into the 70s, it's going to kind of fizzle out from there. And when the last mine in Shelbyville closes in '79, around the same time is when this museum gets its beginning. So I think it's important to talk about this kind of history because even if you think mining is kind of like boring, or you kind of don't know what's so important about it, it's good to note that because of mining, this is where a lot of the early first settlers come to Wisconsin to mine this stuff. So you're going to have a lot of these people that are still have all these people that have descendants that live in Platteville today that are here today are a lot of them are descended from the Cornish, German, whatever miners. So even though it's just mining, it's very important to note that this is one of the places in the state, our state really gets its beginnings, especially when you have first settlers come here in the 1820s, 30s, and stuff like that. So it's important to talk about. And you guys, fun fact, you guys see if you look at the Wisconsin state flag, the two gentlemen on the flag, one is a Cornish miner. So even though we're in a small corner of Wisconsin, a lot of our history comes from just this one little corner. So I think it's important to talk about and note that it's really important to our history.
This is the Badger that you came from?
Yes, so the Cornish miners, they're going to be moving here, and since for one reason or another they can't, cut down every tree in the area, and they either, I think it's mostly because not very many people here right away, so a lot of the miners, instead of building giant wooden houses, they'll build their houses underground, a couple feet underground, and they'll live underground like badgers, so that's where we get the name badgers. Alright, so I'll stop talking, and we'll get these guys on the train. So we'll head out this way, we'll go back around, and we'll get you guys on that train.
Garrison? One question.
Yeah.
Back in the day when this was in its heyday, how large was Platteville at that time?
In the zinc mining or lead mining times?
What was the highest population when they were mining?
3,000. Thereabouts.
And it's 11,000 now.
Roughly, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Now it's tourism driving the people coming here. And,
University.
yep, university.
Behind you both first. There you go. Looks like 10 steps, going down. Okay.
Why? Can Trey come hit us right? Like a thing?